The planet of Zavara was unlike any other in the galaxy, covered in thick, ancient forests and jagged mountains. Its atmosphere shimmered with a strange energy. The Zavarians, a proud and mysterious alien race, had lived for centuries in harmony with nature, respecting the powerful forces that shaped their world. But in the heart of their civilization, a dark tradition had remained, one that many believed was the key to maintaining their peace. Today was the day of the ritual of sacrifice, an event that happened once every century. A day filled with tension, fear, and awe. The air in the capital city was thick with anticipation. The streets, usually alive with the vibrant sounds of Zavarian life, were silent. People stood still, their eyes fixed on the large square that sat at the center of their grand city. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a long, eerie shadow over the arena. It was a place where the most sacred and terrifying part of their culture played out. At the center of this square was the pit of the beast, a massive, open chasm that led down into the deep, unknown layers of the planet. From within the pit came occasional growls, enough to send a chill down the spine of anyone who dared to approach. The Zavarians had long ago sealed off the pit, but they would never forget what lurked beneath. A monstrous beast, older than the oldest legends, was said to call this pit home. No one knew exactly what the creature looked like. Some said it had the body of a serpent. Others whispered of wings like an eagle. What was certain was that it was powerful, relentless, and hungered for blood. The time had come for another sacrifice. To the beast, it was a custom passed down through generations, a dark promise made by their ancestors every century. A young Zavarian would be chosen to descend into the pit. It was believed that offering a life to the creature would keep their people safe for another 100 years, ensuring that peace would reign over Zavara. The chosen one would never return, but their sacrifice would bring peace to the planet once more. Today, the girl chosen for this fate was Lyra, a young Zavarian woman who had barely reached adulthood. Her skin glimmered under the sun, her long, silver hair flowed like a river of light, and her eyes that once sparkled with dreams of freedom, now showed only a deep, resigned acceptance. She had been raised knowing this would one day be her fate. Her parents had prepared her for this moment, even though they knew they would never see her again. As the crowd gathered around the pit, Lyra was led out into the open by the elders of the Zavarian Council. She wore the ceremonial robe, embroidered with ancient symbols of her people. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the robe's edges, but she walked forward with dignity. The murmurs of the crowd faded as she approached the edge of the pit. She could hear her heart pounding in her chest, but she did not dare to look down. The elders stood around her, chanting in the old language, their voices rising in unison. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, with the power of the ritual. It was as if the very planet itself was watching, waiting for the sacrifice to begin. Lyra's gaze was fixed on the horizon, her thoughts far from the ceremony. She could hear the low growl of the beast below, a reminder that this was not just a tradition but a necessity. A hush fell over the crowd as the elder closest to Lyra raised a ceremonial staff. High into the air, it was carved from the bones of the first Zavarians, passed down from one generation to the next. The symbol on its top glowed with a faint, otherworldly light. The staff was the final signal that the ritual was about to begin. As the elder chanted the final words, Lyra was slowly pushed toward the pit's edge. Her legs felt weak, and the world seemed to tilt beneath her feet, but she did not resist. She had been taught that this was her destiny. To resist would be an insult to the tradition, to everything the Zavarians held sacred. The crowd's eyes were on her as she stood at the edge of the abyss. The ground beneath her feet was cold and unyielding, the shadows from the pit stretching up like dark hands. The growls of the beast grew louder, more impatient, and Lyra knew there was no turning back. Her thoughts flashed to her family, her mother, who had quietly cried in her arms last night, and her father, who had tried to be strong but couldn't hide the pain in his eyes. She thought of her friends, of her youth, and of the life she had once imagined. But none of that mattered now. She had been chosen. This was her purpose, her duty. As the elder gave the final command, Lyra's body was pushed into the pit. The world blurred around her as she fell, the cold air rushing past her. Her heart raced, and she shut her eyes, preparing for the end. But just before she hit the ground, she heard something strange, a loud thud followed by the sound of scraping metal. Her body jerked as if pulled by some invisible force. She opened her eyes to see a human figure standing at the edge of the pit, his silhouette illuminated by the dying light of the sun. He was watching her, his eyes filled with determination, as if he had come to rescue her. For a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. The crowd's gasps echoed in the air. Was this an angel sent from the gods, or was it something else, something even more extraordinary than the Xaverians could ever imagine? The human had stepped into the arena, and with him, hope had returned. But would it be enough to save her from the monster lurking below? Lyra's fall felt like an eternity, the world around her spinning as she plunged into the depths of the pit. Her body slammed against the jagged walls, each scrape of stone sending a shock through her bones. She gasped, trying to orient herself, but the darkness enveloped her, swallowing any hint of light. Her heart pounded, and for the first time, fear seized her. It wasn't just the fall that terrified her. It was what waited for her below. The ground finally gave way beneath her feet, and she landed with a thud, her legs buckling beneath her. Pain radiated up her spine, but it didn't matter. She forced herself to her feet, trembling, knowing what was coming. The growls of the beast echoed through the pit, each reverberation shaking the air. It was close, so close. She turned in circles, trying to make sense of her surroundings. The air was thick with a foul stench, a mix of decay and something far more primal. Her breath came in short gasps, the weight of the moment crashing down on her. She could barely see, but she could feel the presence of something large moving in the shadows. The ground beneath her feet was wet, and every step she took seemed to sink deeper into the muck, as if the pit itself was alive, feeding on her fear. The growl came again, louder this time, closer. It vibrated through her chest, and for a moment, she froze. It was impossible to tell where the sound was coming from. The entire pit seemed to hum with the creature's low, guttural voice. But she could feel it, a primal instinct that told her that the beast was near. In the darkness, a pair of glowing eyes suddenly appeared, faint at first, like distant stars, then growing brighter, more intense. The air became colder, the light from those eyes cutting through the darkness. The beast was real. It was no myth, no legend. It was here. Lyra's breath hitched, and her pulse raced as the eyes grew larger. Then came the sound of movement, heavy, deliberate steps that sent vibrations through the ground. The beast was closing in, and the shadows began to shift, revealing its shape. It was monstrous, a mass of sinewy muscles and thick, scale-like skin. Its form was fluid, shifting in the dark, and for a moment, it seemed to blend into the shadows. But there was no mistaking its sheer size. It was a giant, larger than anything she had ever imagined. Its head rose above her, its mouth wide enough to swallow her whole in a single bite. Lyra's legs gave out, and she collapsed to the ground, her hands instinctively reaching out for anything to grab onto. But there was nothing, only the slick, damp floor. Her eyes locked on the creature, unable to look away from the glowing orbs that stared down at her, waiting for the moment to strike. She tried to push herself up, but her body felt like it had turned to stone. Her limbs were weak, her chest tight with panic. This was it, the end. The monster's growl grew louder, more insistent, and the ground trembled beneath her. But just as it seemed the beast would lunge, a new sound broke through the silence. The scraping of metal, the unmistakable sound of a human's footsteps. But they were too steady, too deliberate to be someone running in fear. A figure appeared at the edge of the pit, silhouetted by the dim light from above. The crowd's gasps were drowned out by the rumble of the creature below. But Lyra's heart skipped a beat. Was it possible? Was someone actually here to save her? The human stood tall, unwavering. His eyes, though distant, were focused on her. And then they shifted toward the beast. His gaze was steady, unafraid, as if he were facing a challenge, not a nightmare. The creature growled louder, its massive claws scraping the stone floor as it prepared to strike. The human didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his body moving with a fluid grace that made him seem almost like a shadow, blending with the darkness around him. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. What was he doing? What could he possibly do against that thing? The man didn't hesitate. He raised his arms, not in defense, but in an almost ceremonial gesture, and with a voice that carried across the pit, he spoke. "Leave her alone." The words echoed in the cavernous space, filling the pit with an energy that seemed to freeze the beast in its tracks. The creature paused, its glowing eyes narrowing, as if trying to understand what it had just heard. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The beast growled low in its throat, a rumbling sound that sent shivers down Lyra's spine. But it didn't move. It was watching him. Lyra couldn't believe it. She had been prepared to die in this pit, to become just another sacrifice in the never-ending cycle of their tradition. But now, a human, an outsider, stood between her and the death she had been promised. Her chest tightened with confusion, fear, and something else, hope. The human didn't back down. He took another step forward, his eyes never leaving the beast. It was as if he could see through its monstrous exterior, understanding that it wasn't just a creature of rage, but one bound by something deeper. Perhaps by the very same ritual that had brought her here. The air grew thick with tension, the silence pressing down like a heavy weight. Every movement, every breath felt like it could ignite the fury of the beast. But instead, it stood still, its eyes locked on the human, its growl now a low rumble. And in that moment, Lyra knew, for the first time since she had been chosen, she wasn't alone. This human, this stranger, had come for her, and perhaps, just perhaps, he could save her. But would it be enough? Could he really face down the monster that had claimed so many before her? The suspense lingered in the air, as the battle between human bravery and ancient terror was about to begin. The air in the pit was thick with tension, a heavy silence pressing in around them. Lyra's heart was still racing, but now, instead of the paralyzing fear she had felt moments before, there was something else, something more uncertain. Hope Dachi watched in stunned silence as the human, standing at the edge of the pit, kept his eyes locked on the monster. His hands were steady at his sides, and despite the enormous creature glaring at him with glowing eyes, he didn't flinch. There was something about him, something in his posture, in the way he stood, that suggested he wasn't afraid. But that didn't make sense. How could anyone not be afraid of this beast? It was a monster, a creature of legend, one that had consumed countless lives over centuries. What hope did he have? Lyra could barely breathe, but she couldn't take her eyes off him. The man had a presence, a quiet strength that cut through the madness of the pit. She had heard stories of humans, of their stubbornness, their courage, their unyielding will to survive against all odds. But this was different. This man wasn't acting out of desperation. He was acting with purpose. For a long moment, the monster and the human stood locked in a silent battle of wills. The beast snarled, its massive jaws snapping in the air, saliva dripping from its sharp teeth. But it didn't attack. It was as if it was waiting for something, or perhaps testing the human. Lyra's mind raced. Why wasn't the beast attacking? Had it never seen a human before? Did it not recognize the human as prey? Or was there something about this man, some energy, some aura, that was different from the others? She couldn't say. All she knew was that her life hung in the balance, and the only thing standing between her and certain death was this stranger. And then, without warning, the beast lunged out. It was so fast that Lyra didn't have time to blink. The ground beneath her trembled as the beast shot toward the human with a roar that shook her to her core, its claws extended like the sharpest of spears, aimed directly at the man. In that split second, Lyra thought she had already seen the human's fate. He would be crushed, just like the others. He wouldn't stand a chance against the sheer force of the beast. But then, in a blur of motion, the human dove to the side, narrowly dodging the monster's claws. The beast's claws scraped across the stone floor with a screech. But the human was already moving again, faster than Lyra thought possible. He darted around the creature with the agility of someone who had fought before. It wasn't just speed. It was strategy. He wasn't reacting to the creature's attacks. He was anticipating them. The human grabbed a nearby rock, heavy and jagged, and hurled it at the beast's head. The monster roared in pain as the stone struck it, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it howled in anger and turned toward the human, its fury now focused entirely on him. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen anything like this. The human was fighting the monster, but it wasn't a fight for survival in the traditional sense. It was as if he were trying to communicate with the creature, to understand it in a way no one else had before. Every movement, every gesture was calculated. He wasn't just running from the monster, he was learning it, anticipating its next move, using the environment to his advantage. And then, just when it seemed like the human would be crushed beneath the creature's massive body, something incredible happened. The beast hesitated for a fraction of a second. It paused, its glowing eyes blinked, as if it had recognized something in the human, something that made it second-guess its next move. The tension in the pit thickened. Even the air seemed to freeze. The monster was still there, its jaws wide and dripping with saliva, but now it was uncertain. Lyra's mind spun. Was the beast trying to make sense of the human? Could it possibly understand him? In the silence that followed, the human didn't hesitate. He charged at the creature, his voice booming across the pit as he shouted something in a language Lyra couldn't understand. His words seemed to hang in the air. Charged with an unknown energy, the beast flinched, pulling back slightly, its eyes narrowing as it studied him. The human wasn't trying to kill it. He was trying to control it. It was impossible. This was a beast of legend, a creature that no one had ever survived. Yet here this human was, standing in front of it with nothing but sheer willpower, challenging it in a way Lyra couldn't even comprehend. The creature growled, more quietly now, as if it were considering its options. It moved closer to the human, its massive body coiling with the intent to strike. But then it stopped. It was no longer charging. It was waiting. The air was thick with the tension of that moment, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The human didn't back down. He stood tall, his feet planted firmly on the ground. He stared directly into the creature's eyes, his gaze unyielding, like he was daring it to make the first move. And for a long, heart-stopping moment, the beast did nothing. It simply watched. Lyra could hardly believe what she was seeing. This man wasn't afraid. But the real question was, did the monster know fear? Then, as if the very air had been charged with a spark, the beast made its move. With a sudden lunge, the creature struck. But this time, the human was ready. He dodged once again, spinning with unnatural agility. He was not only fighting the beast, he was controlling the pace, dictating the rhythm of the battle. His every movement was a response, a calculated effort to guide the creature into a trap. The pit seemed to come alive around them, the battle unfolding like a dangerous dance. And in that moment, Lyra realized this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a battle for dominance, for control, over the fate of not only her life, but the life of the creature in the pit as well. The battle between the human and the beast intensified, a blur of motion and fury that seemed to stretch time itself. Every second was like an eternity, filled with the screeching of claws against stone and the thundering footsteps of the massive creature. Lyra watched, transfixed, her heart pounding as she realized that this was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a contest of wills, a struggle for control over the fate of the pit and everything within it. The creature, now more agitated than ever, launched itself at the human again. Its enormous claws slashed through the air, each swipe powerful, enough to crush anything in its path. But the human was quicker than she ever thought possible. He ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding the beast's sharp talons as they scraped the ground with a deafening screech. Lyra's breath hitched as she saw the human get up, his movements fluid and instinctive, as if he were in a dance. He wasn't just trying to escape the creature's blows. He was taking command of the situation, pushing the beast into a corner, guiding it with every motion. It was almost as if he knew exactly how it would react before it even did. The beast, frustrated by its inability to land a hit, turned in circles, its massive form blocking the light in the pit. It roared in anger, its glowing eyes burning with fury as it searched for an opening. But the human was relentless. He didn't give the creature a chance to regroup. He pressed forward, using the pit's walls to his advantage, leaping off them to gain height, striking with his hands and feet in rapid succession. Every move was purposeful, and for the first time since Lyra had fallen into the pit, the beast seemed uncertain, as if it didn't fully understand what was happening. Lyra had never seen anything like this. Humans, from what she had been told, were fragile creatures, weak, compared to the monsters that roamed the galaxy. But this one was different. He was like a storm, fierce and untamable, dancing around the creature's savage attacks with the grace of someone who had done this before. He wasn't just fighting for his life, he was fighting for her life, too, and in that moment, Lyra realized that the stakes were higher than just surviving the pit. This human was willing to risk everything for her, a stranger from another world. The beast let out another earth-shaking roar, its claws slashing downward with terrifying speed. But this time, the human didn't dodge. He met the creature's attack head-on. Leaping onto its back in a fluid motion, the beast bellowed, its massive body twisting as it tried to throw him off. Lyra's eyes widened in shock. The human wasn't just defending himself, he was attacking. His hands gripped the creature's thick hide, and he used his body weight to steer the beast in an unexpected direction, sending it crashing into the side of the pit. The earth shook beneath them. For a brief moment, there was silence. The creature was stunned, its head shaking as if trying to clear away the disorienting blow. The human took the opportunity to leap off, landing gracefully on his feet, his eyes never leaving the beast. Lyra could see the determination in his gaze, the knowledge that this was not just a physical fight, but a mental one as well. He wasn't just trying to survive, he was trying to outwit the beast, to break its control over the pit. The creature, now seething with rage, recovered quickly. It turned toward him, its eyes narrowing as it bared its sharp teeth. The human didn't flinch. Instead, he began to circle the creature, moving with purpose. Every step he took was calculated, a careful maneuver to draw the beast into a trap. Lyra's heart raced. She could feel the energy building, the tension between the two opponents. Each step was a move in a game, and the human was playing it like a master. Lyra watched, her breath shallow, as the human got closer to the creature, his movements becoming more fluid, more confident. She had no idea how he was doing it, but he was winning. The creature, despite its massive size and raw power, was losing its footing. It was starting to tire, its movements slower, more erratic. But the human wasn't finished yet. He seemed to sense the creature's weakening resolve, and with a sudden burst of speed, he lunged forward. He struck the beast squarely on the side of its head, and for a moment, the creature froze, its massive body swaying as if it didn't know how to respond. Lyra's heart skipped a beat as she realized what was happening. The creature, once so certain of its dominance, was beginning to doubt itself. It had never faced anything like this, a creature that refused to bow, refused to be beaten. It had never seen a human fight with such ferocity and intelligence. The beast stumbled, its eyes wild with confusion. For the first time, it seemed vulnerable. The human didn't hesitate. He struck again, this time using the pit's environment to his advantage, pushing the creature into a corner. The monster roared, but it was no longer the triumphant roar of a predator. It was the desperate cry of a creature that had realized it was not invincible. Lyra's heart raced as she watched the human press on. With each move, he drove the beast further back, chipping away at its confidence. It was a war of attrition now. The creature was weaker, and the human was relentless. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. This fight, this impossible battle, was slowly turning in their favor. And then, as if the universe itself had decided it had seen enough, the creature made a final, desperate move. It lunged forward, teeth bared, aiming to crush the human under its massive weight. But the human was ready. With one final, powerful move, he ducked and dodged, using the creature's own momentum to send it crashing into the walls of the pit. The sound of the impact echoed through the chamber, and the creature lay still, its massive form unmoving. The pit was silent, the air heavy with the aftermath of the battle. Lyra stared, unable to believe her eyes. The beast, the legendary terror that had haunted her people for centuries, was defeated, and the human had done it. Breathing heavily, the human turned to Lyra, his face expressionless, but filled with an undeniable strength. In that moment, she knew that she was no longer a sacrifice. She was free, and it was because of him. the human who had saved her from the impossible. The silence in the pit was deafening. The giant beast, now motionless on the ground, lay in a heap of twisted limbs, its once terrifying growls replaced by the steady thrum of its breathing. The human stood over it, panting heavily, his chest rising and falling with each breath, his eyes fixed on the creature's defeated form. The pit that had once felt like a tomb now seemed strangely still, as if time itself had paused to take in the aftermath of the struggle. Lyra, still struggling to comprehend what had just happened, found herself staring at the human. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the events that had unfolded before her. She had never imagined this would be her fate, to be saved by someone from another world, a stranger who had risked everything for her. The man had fought the monster with such precision and confidence, as if he had been preparing for this moment his entire life. It was almost as if he had known exactly what to do, as if he had already won the battle before it even began. The human turned to her, his gaze steady but unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Lyra's heart pounded, and a million thoughts swirled in her mind. What should she say? What could she say? This man, this hero, had saved her, but she felt like a stranger to him. He had no reason to help her, no reason to risk his life in a battle he knew nothing about. And yet, he had done it anyway. "Thank you," Lyra whispered, her voice barely above a whisper, but the words felt heavy in the stillness of the pit. The human nodded, his expression unreadable. He didn't seem surprised by her gratitude, nor did he seem to want to say much. Instead, he turned his gaze back to the monster, his eyes narrowing as he took in the beast's fallen form. He looked almost thoughtful, as if considering something beyond the immediate victory. Lyra watched him, trying to understand what was going through his mind. She had seen courage before, in the eyes of the Zavarian warriors who had fought in the ancient battles. But this was different. This was quiet courage, the kind that didn't need to boast or show off. It was the kind of courage that existed in the stillness of a moment when everything was at stake. And yet, the hero remained calm. But the calmness didn't last long. A distant rumble shook the pit, the ground beneath their feet trembling ever so slightly. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew stronger. The earth seemed to breathe, as if the pit itself had a life of its own. And then, a low growl echoed from deep within the darkness. Below them, the human tensed, his muscles coiling like a spring, ready for anything. He turned sharply, scanning the edges of the pit, his eyes narrowing as he tried to make sense of the growing vibrations. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. This was no ordinary monster. It was part of something bigger, something deeper, that had been hiding beneath the surface for eons. The ground trembled again, this time more forcefully, and the growl grew louder. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The monster they had just defeated was only the beginning. The pit, it seemed, had many more secrets to reveal. The human's eyes locked onto hers, and in that instant, Lyra understood. They weren't out of danger yet. The beast may have fallen, but something else was awakening, something far more dangerous. "We need to move," the human said, his voice low but urgent. Lyra didn't hesitate. She followed his lead, instinctively knowing that staying here any longer would be a death sentence. They moved quickly, climbing the uneven walls of the pit, their hands finding footholds in the rough stone. The vibrations continued, each one stronger than the last, as if something massive was stirring beneath them. As they reached the lip of the pit, Lyra glanced back one last time. The beast they had defeated still lay motionless at the bottom, but the shadows in the pit seemed to deepen, swirling like a storm. The sense of unease that had settled in her chest grew stronger. She didn't know what was coming, but she knew one thing for sure. Whatever it was worse than the monster they had just faced. The human helped her climb the last few feet, his grip firm and steady. Once they were out of the pit, he paused, scanning the surrounding area, his eyes sharp as he listened to the rumbling that continued to echo through the ground. "We have to find shelter," he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of urgency. "Something bigger is coming." Lyra nodded, not needing to ask questions. She could feel it too. The air was heavy, charged with the energy of something ancient and powerful, She didn't know what the human was talking about, but she didn't need to. The way he spoke, the way his body was tense, told her all she needed to know. This wasn't over. They ran, moving swiftly through the rocky landscape of the pit's edge, trying to stay ahead of the tremors that grew stronger with every passing moment. Lyra's mind was racing. What had the human meant? What was coming? And then the earth shook once more, harder than before. The ground cracked beneath their feet, and a roar so deafening it seemed to come from the very heart of the planet itself filled the air. It was different from the creature's growls. It was deeper, darker, and far more terrifying. Lyra stumbled, almost losing her footing, but the human was there, pulling her forward, his grip unyielding. "We need to get to cover, now," he shouted. Lyra's pulse raced as she ran alongside him. Her thoughts scattered. What had they awakened? What monster lurked beneath the surface? And why was this human so calm, so determined in the face of something so unimaginable? The ground rumbled again, and the sound of something massive shifting in the depths echoed. In the distance, whatever was coming, it was not like anything she had ever faced, and it was clear that this human, this stranger, was the only one who could help her survive it. The sky above them was darkening rapidly as they sprinted, the light fading with each passing second. Lyra's breath came in sharp gasps, her legs aching from the adrenaline-fueled dash, but the human beside her was unfazed. He moved like a shadow, cutting through the landscape with unearthly precision. Every step seemed calculated, as though he had done this 1,000 times before. Even though Lyra knew nothing of him, the rumbling beneath their feet continued, vibrating through the earth like a warning, a pulse that echoed in her chest. The tremors had grown more frequent, the ground beneath them quaking with increasing intensity. Lyra could feel the air shift, heavy with something she couldn't quite place, a palpable sense of dread, as if the planet itself was alive, and it was angry. The human, seemingly sensing her unease, shot her a glance over his shoulder. His expression was grim, lips pressed together in concentration, but his eyes held a glimmer of determination. "Keep moving," he urged, his voice low but firm. "We're not safe yet." Lyra didn't need to be told twice. She pushed herself harder, her feet pounding against the rocky ground as they climbed higher, away from the pit. She had no idea where they were going, but she trusted the human's instincts. He seemed to know this land, its pulse, its rhythms. He was leading them to safety. Or so she hoped. Ahead, the jagged rocks of the landscape began to give way to a narrow passage between two towering cliffs, a natural tunnel carved by centuries of erosion. It was their only option. There was no time to hesitate. Without slowing, the human veered toward the opening, and Lyra followed closely behind, her mind racing with questions she didn't have the answers to. Who was this man? Why had he risked everything to save her? She had never seen a human before today, but now she couldn't shake the feeling that he was unlike anything she had ever encountered. As they ducked into the narrow passage, the sounds of the world outside seemed to fade. The ground no longer trembled with the force of the beast's awakening, and for a moment, Lyra dared to hope that they had escaped. But the silence was short-lived. A deafening roar split the air, so loud and powerful that the walls of the passage seemed to shake. It was a sound unlike any she had ever heard, a deep, guttural roar that sent a chill through her bones. The ground trembled again, this time, more violently than before, as if the very earth were being torn apart. Lyra stumbled, her heart racing in her chest. The human reached out instinctively, grabbing her arm to steady her. His eyes were wide now, no longer calm but filled with a new sense of urgency. "It's not over," he muttered, his voice tight. "We have to get to higher ground. Now." The roar echoed again, closer this time, and the sound of heavy footsteps followed. The creature, whatever it was on their trail, and it was moving fast. The human pulled Lyra forward, urging her to move faster. The passage narrowed further ahead, but they had no choice. They had to push through. The air inside the tunnel grew thick, stifling, as if the very walls of the passage were closing in on them. But there was no turning back now. They couldn't afford to stop, not when whatever had awoken was so close. They reached the end of the passage, where the ground sloped upward, and they emerged into a small clearing at the foot of a steep hill. Lyra looked around, her breath catching in her throat. The landscape stretched out before them, a vast expanse of rock and barren land, far in the distance. She could see the outlines of what looked like an ancient structure, crumbling and weathered. By time, the human's gaze shifted toward the structure, and Lyra followed his eyes. "That's our only chance," he said, his voice low. "If we can make it there, we'll be able to defend ourselves." Lyra nodded, understanding. The structure, ancient and abandoned, was their only hope. It might offer shelter from whatever was hunting them, or at least a place to regroup and figure out their next move. They didn't have time to waste. Without another word, they began to climb the hill, moving quickly but cautiously. The human's pace was steady, but Lyra struggled to keep up. The strain of their earlier sprint had taken its toll, but she refused to slow down. Not now. Not when they were so close. The ground beneath them trembled again, and Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The roar from the creature echoed louder, much louder now, its proximity unmistakable. It was close, too close. They had no time to reach the structure. It was coming for them. The human's hand shot out, grabbing Lyra's arm with surprising force. His eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her blood run cold. "Don't look back," he ordered, his voice urgent but controlled. "Whatever happens, don't look back." Lyra nodded, her throat dry. She had no intention of looking back, not when she knew what was chasing them. But the dread that clawed at her chest told her it was only a matter of time before they were caught. The creature's footsteps grew louder, the ground shaking beneath them with each monstrous step it took. Lyra's pulse quickened. Her legs burned, her body begging for respite, but she didn't dare stop. Not when the creature was closing in. As they neared the ancient structure, the human glanced over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the horizon. The fear in his eyes was palpable now, and for the first time, Lyra understood the true gravity of their situation. They weren't just being hunted by a single beast anymore. They were being hunted by something much worse. The roar of the creature echoed once more, and this time, Lyra felt it deep in her bones. The beast was no longer just a predator. It was a force of nature, something primal and ancient, and it was about to catch them. The race against time had turned into a fight for survival. They had no idea what awaited them at the structure, but they had no choice. There was nowhere else to go. With every ounce of energy she had left, Lyra pushed forward, following the human's lead, hoping beyond hope that they could reach safety before it was too late. The towering structure loomed before them, its ancient stone walls weathered by centuries of neglect. It stood like a forgotten monument, its purpose lost to time, but it offered the only chance they had left. The human and Lyra reached the base of the crumbling edifice, their feet pounding the rocky ground as the creature's footsteps echoed closer behind them. The air was thick with the scent of dust and decay, but it was a welcome change from the crushing tension they had just escaped. There was no turning back now. Lyra's heart raced, each breath coming in shallow gasps as they reached the entrance. The massive stone door was half crushed, its surface scarred by years of neglect, but it was still intact. They had made it this far, but would it be enough? The human didn't hesitate. He pulled Lyra toward the door with surprising strength, pushing it open with a grunt. The stone creaked under the strain, but finally it gave way, revealing a dark interior. The space was vast, its floor uneven and covered with layers of dust. Shadows clung to the walls, and the air was cool and musty, heavy with the weight of forgotten history. Lyra's eyes adjusted to the gloom as she stepped inside, her feet echoing on the stone floor. But before she could take another step, the human turned to her, his expression grim. "Get to the far corner. Stay low. Don't make a sound." Lyra nodded, her instincts taking over as she scurried to the back of the structure. She crouched behind a broken pillar, her heart thudding in her chest, her eyes flickering toward the entrance. She knew the creature was close. She could feel it, hear it in the earth beneath her feet. The monster was relentless, its rage filling the air with an almost tangible presence. The human stood near the entrance, his back against the wall, watching the darkness outside. His hands were tense at his sides, ready for whatever was coming next. He was still calm, still steady, and for a moment, Lyra wondered how he could remain so collected in the face of the terror that was hunting them. Then they heard it, the beast's roar, louder now, the ground shaking with each step it took. The structure quivered as the monster neared, its growls vibrating through the walls. It was just outside. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as the human's eyes flickered toward her. His lips tightened in determination. "This is it," he murmured under his breath. "Stay down. No matter what happens, stay quiet." The sounds of the creature's approach grew louder, and Lyra could feel the tension in the air. Thick and suffocating, her pulse quickened, the reality of their situation settling in like a heavy weight on her chest. The human wasn't just trying to survive. He was planning something. He was preparing to face the creature once again. Lyra watched him carefully, trying to understand what he was thinking. The creature was massive, its power unfathomable, and yet here was this human, this stranger, standing his ground. Was he really planning to fight it again? What could they possibly do against something so terrifying? And then she saw it. A shift in the human's posture. His muscles tensed, his eyes narrowed in focus. And for the first time since they had entered the structure, he looked unsure. The realization hit her like a jolt of electricity. He wasn't prepared for what was coming. The creature was stronger than anything he had faced before. It was almost as if the ground itself was warning them, the vibrations growing more intense. The human looked toward the entrance once more, his eyes scanning the darkness, trying to gauge the beast's movements. The moment of truth was upon them, and there was no more time for planning, no more room for mistakes. Suddenly, the creature appeared in the doorway. Its hulking form filled the entrance, casting a long shadow that stretched across the floor. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light, its massive jaws snapping in frustration as it sniffed the air. The human didn't flinch. He stood tall, his body coiled like a spring, ready to act at a moment's notice. The creature took a step forward, its footfall sending vibrations through the ground. The human's gaze never wavered as he calculated his next move. His hand reached for something at his side, and Lyra saw a glint of metal, a weapon, perhaps, or something else, but before she could make out what it was, the human's body moved with surprising speed, launching himself forward, closing the distance between himself and the beast. The creature roared in fury as the human dodged its massive claws, rolling to the side, using the limited space to his advantage. Lyra held her breath, watching in disbelief as he fought with incredible precision, each move deliberate and calculated. He was no longer fighting with desperation. This was something else entirely. It was strategy, instinct, and perhaps even a bit of luck that had brought him this far. For a moment, the two were locked in a dance of survival. The human struck when the creature's guard was down, darting in and out of its reach, using the terrain to stay one step ahead. The beast, though powerful, seemed to grow frustrated, its attacks becoming more erratic as it tried to catch its prey. Lyra stayed low, her body trembling with fear and adrenaline. She wanted to do something, anything, to help, but the human had made it clear that she had to stay hidden. Her eyes darted between the fight and the shadows, watching as the human and the beast continued to clash. And then, with a flash of movement, the human made his move. He ducked beneath the creature's massive claws, slipping between its legs, with a fluid motion, before striking out with a powerful blow to its side. The beast howled in pain, stumbling back, its massive form lurching in the confined space of the structure. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The human had done it. He had found the creature's weakness. The creature reeled, its eyes narrowing, in fury as it prepared to retaliate. But the human was already on the move, darting forward with a final, decisive strike. In one fluid motion, he jammed his weapon into the beast's underbelly, driving it deep with a force that sent a jolt of electricity through Lyra's veins. The creature let out one last, deafening roar before collapsing to the ground with a tremendous crash. The pit fell silent. Lyra's chest heaved with relief, her body trembling from the sheer intensity of the battle she had just witnessed. The human stood over the fallen beast, his breath ragged but victorious. He looked down at the creature for a moment, his expression unreadable, and then turned toward Lyra, his eyes softening as they met hers. "It's over," he said, his voice low, almost gentle. "You're safe." For the first time since they had met, Lyra felt a wave of gratitude flood through her. She wasn't just saved, she was free. And it was because of this stranger, this human, who had risked everything to protect her.